You see, something's going to happen. Something wonderful.
My God, it's full of stars.
Hey everyone, welcome to the NY Patriot Show. This week I'm coming back at you with JJ Vance and Ron from New England to talk more about the Brian Kohberger case in the Idaho 4. There has been a couple of new developments since the last time we spoke, and probably a few other things that are questionable and stuff that I've seen and has made me think about the case that might be worth talking about again. To get into it just real quick, in case people don't know who Ron and JJ are, if this is their first time seeing these two gentlemen. Ron, would you like to introduce yourself and let everybody know where they can find you and what your deal is?
Yeah, sure thing. Ron from New England, host of the Wicked Planet podcast. You can find me anywhere. Wherever you listen to podcasts, come and find me. And I'm on Instagram at Ron from New England. Come and check it out.
And you cover kind of like an array of topics too, don't you?
Yeah, I'd like to get, because anything and everything I can talk about. And a lot of things interest me, mostly conspiracies and the bullshit in politics, right?
Yeah.
So I go pretty good on that. But I like the true crime stuff. We got a bunch of cold case stuff we're working on, me and Buckley. And so we got some interesting stuff in the works. I'm trying to branch out a little bit away from what I call the mainstream conspiracies.
Yes, yeah.
Sure. Getting like severely bored with that stuff. But, I will talk about current events and kind of give my 2 cents on it, from a non-BS point of view.
Yeah, that's kind of why I wanted to just let you put that out there too, is because like you kind of like you're not like if people are into conspiracies or true crime or kind of like daily news, I think that they could listen to your show. You're kind of wide topics, and I think that's awesome. That's great. So.
Well, that's what we do in the beginning. We do like the first half. We'll talk a little bit about what we got going on, local things, and then things that are happening out in the world. Like I had a whole list of things in the recent show. And then when we get towards the second half of the show, if we have a deep subject we're going to get into, then we get into that subject for the second part of the show. So we're unscripted. I don't have a lot of guests on. Very seldom do I have guests on. We just go for it. We just hit play and go for it. So I think it makes it kind of entertaining.
Oh yeah, no, that's for sure. And JJ, oh, and by the way, the links for all of them are in the bottom, so you can go check out that stuff now if you want. And JJ, let everybody know what's up, man. And thank you for coming back. Thank you.
No, thank you for the invite, Nick. JJ Vance, I'm the host of the Operation GCD podcast. That's Garbage Can Dude. It's where I like to mash together comedy and conspiracy theory. And I build the podcast as a shenanigan-infused journey into the mind of this particular garbage can dude. And I cover, topics of parapolitical nature, occult nature. I don't get too much into the true crime stuff. However, occasionally I do. I have a professional history of a career in the Air Force military police. I have an education in criminal justice, grad, post-grad. So I do like to delve into these topics. This case in particular with the Idaho 4 and Brian Kohberger has been of a unique interest to me since essentially it occurred. It's kind of grown into a greater interest of mine because I have a deep dislike for miscarriages of justice and the homicide of bright young adults. And that is the case we have here. And another incident where I take unique umbrage with the homicide of bright young adults is the smiley face killers. I do a lot of coverage on that as well on the Operation GCD podcast. And Nick, thanks for the invite. And Ron, great to see you again. Looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. No,
yeah, you too, JJ. Yeah.
Yeah, and just real quick to let the people listening on the live right now, if there's any questions you got that, goes along with all this, I guess, just ask. And if you have anything to add, toss that into the chat as well, because I do check. Like when I did that premiere last week on Rex Human in the Gilgo Beach, there was amazing stuff being added in the chat. So if any of you people out there now are listening, please add, because it definitely helps, I think, with the show. And real quick, just to make a quick announcement, I was supposed to drop something this week on the Go-Go Beach. That's going to end up being next week. I was originally looking to show connections to the Book of the Law, but now I've probably found about 15 or 20 connections to Aleister Crowley poems, also to the Gilgo Beach murders. So I'm going to be doing part 2 on a whole bunch of other stuff and poems that Crowley wrote, and showing the numerical value, matching streets, places, and peoples and dates. And then the third part, we'll get into the Book of Lies that he wrote.
It sounds like some good research, Nick. I look forward to checking it out.
Dude, it's insane. It's insane. But I see a couple of people in the chat that I think were checking that out last time. So just to let you all know, I do have some crazy shit coming with the numbers, poems of Crowley, and Book of Lies, all tying into the Gilgo Beach murders. It's actually bizarre at this point, where it's like, is this like the code to the Matrix? Because I can't even see how somebody could even purposely match all this shit. It's just insane,
Sure.
Yeah. So that's enough out of me and I guess the public service announcement there. Back to the Idaho 4 in Kohberger. I guess, one thing that I would like to, maybe start off with, even though, it's kind of something that's fairly new, but I thought about asking you, JJ, I guess maybe because you have a little bit more, background with actually going to school for law and all that stuff. But to me, I thought that whole thing with them with the alibi, I thought that was really weird, actually. Like, I didn't know what to get out of that. It's almost like, well, I don't know. So what's up? What do you think is up with that? And Ron, of course, like your opinion, but whatever you think too. But
no, it's a good way to start this off, because that is one of the most unique aspects I found in recent developments in the case. I was kind of unfamiliar with the Idaho law in that regard, because really the way I look at it, what they're trying to do is violate Brian Kohberger's Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. He has the right to not make incriminating statements at any point in time in this trial, and if he chooses to invoke that right, he's welcome to do that at any point in time. And he kind of already danced on or at least is on the fence of doing that already by not pleading at his initial hearing. He stood quietly when the judge asked him to submit a plea, and the judge submitted the non-guilty plea form, which was the law in Idaho if you don't make a plea. So he's already kind of started down that path. And I just think, as you pointed out, this whole all these back and forth motions to try to compel or force Brian Kohberger to produce his alibi now is simply lawfare. And and lawfare, if you're not familiar with it, or Ron or any of the folks of the interwebs, it's kind of a term that's grown in recent popularity in recent years, at least, as far as applying the principles of combat to law. And it's not necessarily following the law or trying to adjudicate things in a lawful or organized manner, but using any measure under the law to combat the opposing side. And that seems like what the state of Idaho has done here with trying to force Kohberger to produce his alibi. Now, I think as a defense attorney has done great work by not, kowtowing to the state's demands of producing this alibi at this point in time, because they know what they're up against. They realize what the details are that the public doesn't realize. And I think that sight picture that his counsel has is a far more cogent sight picture, and understanding that it is best for Kohberger to remain silent until the state makes the first move and produces their case.
Yeah, 100%, JJ. Apparently there's an Idaho statute that pertains to this whole deal, where the prosecution is demanding that Brian Kohberger's defense hands over his alibi. And his defense, which is a public defender, she's saying that, Ann Taylor is her name, she's saying that, look, if you're going to get it, you'll get it during, further discovery.
Right, when I damn well feel like providing it.
Yeah, because what's happening is we know that the prosecution has been holding back the exculpatory evidence that we talked about in the last episode, right? So so like you say, using a little lawfare, right?
Yep.
Which is a perfect term for what's going on. This
Oh,
is
absolutely.
this is a tit for tat freaking battle over how this case is going to proceed forward. Because if the prosecution is holding back evidence, but they're demanding that the defense give them evidence, well, they're going to probably want that evidence so they can adjust their already over-adjusted prosecution to still make it fit into their narrative.
Exactly.
Because the more that I look into this, the less that I think Brian Kohberger is either not guilty or did not act alone in this.
Yeah, you're spot on. You're spot on, Ron.
Yeah, and the other thing is we know now that the prosecution admitted what they call genetic genealogy that they used with the DNA that actually wasn't Brian Kohberger's DNA.
Right.
To pin him onto this. Okay, so you have that, number one, and now you have the police officers and the prosecution widening the range of what type of vehicle it could be.
Oh,
Instead of having it nailed down to exactly what Kohberger drove, now it could be, well, we might be off on the year, we might be off on XYZ.
And they've had that problem since day one in this investigation, as far as not even having any clue what the actual perpetrator's vehicle is. And in all honesty, there's no reasonable suspicion in my mind that they don't know exactly what the vehicle was that was used by the perpetrator or perpetrators in this case. And for example, the murder home there on 1122 King Street had a Ring doorbell camera. So if the vehicle parked in front of the home or the intruders and perpetrators of this crime entered through the front of the home, they know exactly what they look like. They know exactly what the car looks like. And there's a lot of other neighboring video cameras. There should be no ambiguity on this vehicle.
Right.
There has remained ambiguity since day one.
The other thing, JJ, too, is that's bringing into question is this little black luxury SUV that they've been talking about.
I think that's an important piece too.
Yeah, for sure. And not only that, are we still trying to figure out what kind of vehicle the DoorDash driver was driving?
Exactly.
Okay.
No one's divulged that as well.
Really? They haven't said what kind of car that is yet?
Nope.
Okay, so I looked up some stats, some automotive stats the other day.
Oh, nice.
Do you know what the most popular color of any car sold in the United States is?
That's probably white.
Yeah. It's white.
Yep.
So now, and I can tell you can put all kinds of mid-size four-door sedans white together at night on a nighttime surveillance camera. You're going to have a hard time distinguishing one car from another, even me, who's in the auto business and knows what each car is.
Yeah, those are good points.
They are indistinguishable to the layperson.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't mean to interrupt you there, Ron. Yeah, absolutely. And if you recall, I think I mentioned in the last one, the Moscow Police Department was operating I believe, a silver in color four-door sedan, very, very similar looking to a Elantra, in the immediate vicinity of the crime scene in the immediate time frame of the crime. And that's documented by their own body camera footage from they were allegedly sitting there to police underage drinkers coming, in and around the campus there.
Yeah, not only that, but they were probably keeping an eye on this house if it was a known drug house, right?
I suspect the same.
And I'm not accusing the police of doing this, but it wouldn't surprise me if they said, oh, hey, take this car and drive it past that camera. Just take this car, drive it around the neighborhood in case we need to use maybe some footage to add to our narrative. I'm not accusing them of that, but if I was a shady cop, I would do that.
Well, if you have a drug trafficking problem in a town and the cops are at least compromised in that drug trafficking operation, that's a good way to kind of, provide a deterrent from the actual investigation, the actual perpetrator's vehicle.
Yeah, all I know is that this is starting to smell a lot more like cover-up than anything else, as far as I'm concerned.
I would agree with you. And to speak to the forensics, this alleged genealogical, DNA investigation that was allegedly conducted, because I can't even say that it was conducted because they've done nothing to provide the discovery to the defendant. Now, I think they're on the fifth or sixth motion from Kohberger's defense counsel to get this discovery, and now they're even trying to throw in other other wrenches in the mix, if you will, or to say, oh, well, look, the FBI's got some of this stuff, this private lab's got some of this stuff, the state has some of this stuff. We can't produce all of it. These other parties have to produce these things. So they've created all these other little detours in this discovery process to prevent Kohberger from actually getting this evidence. And at the end of the day, I've seen nothing at all in any court filings that would substantiate that the law enforcement authorities or the FBI, because it's been reported as both parties, I'm not sure which party did this, entered into private property, into a private community in Kohberger's parents' house in Pennsylvania, and seized trash from a trash can. Now, you may be thinking, if it's in a trash can, it's on a public road, that would be the case. However, this was a private community, private gated community. That's not a public road. They would need a search warrant in which to gain access to that, in which to get that trash.
Okay, so JJ, the whole thing with the DNA is totally sketchy.
Oh, super sketchy.
Right.
Yeah.
So what you're saying about the trash in a gated community, I have to agree with you on that. I did have a friend that was in the trash dumpster business.
Okay.
There's an actual law in New Hampshire that's named after him.
Nice.
Because once the carrier of that trash gets that trash in their truck, either a roll-off truck, a compactor, whatever, that trash now becomes the property of that company, be it Waste Management or, BFI was a big one here for a long time.
Sure.
They actually tried to arrest him for something, and he beat them with that law. And the law, it's called the Naughton Law in New Hampshire, because
good for him.
Once he took that trash, it was his possession. So if you take that reasoning, if Kohberger's parents are living in a gated private community, that trash is still theirs, even if it's outside their house in a barrel on the side of the road waiting for trash pickup.
Correct. That's my understanding.
That trash does not belong to the HOA. It does not belong to the neighbor. It doesn't belong to anybody but Brian Kohberger's parents until it leaves that barrel and goes in the back of the compactor truck.
Yep.
Then it becomes the property of, let's just use the name Waste Management. It becomes the property of Waste Management. Then if the prosecution or any detectives or any investigatory things going on with this, they would have had to get a warrant to search the trash at Waste Management.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem like any of that has occurred. And you make some good points. I like the story about your friend there. That's a good story.
Yeah, he was quite a guy, man.
He sounds like it. Yeah, but you're right, though. I mean, in some circumstances, the police can pick up trash in public areas and then test that for DNA. And that's actually occurred in this case. So one of the, according to the court filings, one of the suspects the police did have early on in the investigation before Kohberger was an individual who would not give up his DNA. And as a result of that, they followed this individual around town up there, Moscow or Pullman, one of the two cities there. They didn't specify. And the individual discarded a cigarette butt, and they picked up the cigarette butt, and they tested that for DNA. So
now, what kind of were they using touch DNA for all this stuff?
Again, it's the ambiguity of a lot of what has been released by the state in regards to the DNA, because they claimed that the touch DNA was the DNA on the knife sheath, the alleged knife sheath that was allegedly at the crime scene. Again, I continue to say allegedly because the state has produced no substantial evidence at all no evidence at all to substantiate these claims of the knife sheath. And on top of that, the actual police reports, the arresting affidavits, et cetera, the statements by the arresting officer or the investigatory officers, they have there's a lot of ambiguity there because there's disparate stories about when the knife sheath was discovered, who saw the knife sheath first, where precisely the knife sheath was. And one of the things that I look for in an investigation is if you're going to seize a piece of evidence like this knife sheath, then in the documents, it's going to tell you who seized it, when it was seized, and it should be tagged with some sort of evidence tag number in that same document. And that stuff is not present here.
Okay, let me add something to the knife sheath. Okay, I got a little paragraph here called State's Evidence, right? It says the prosecutors admitted publicly last month that they used investigative genetic genealogy to identify Kohberger as a suspect. Kohberger's DNA was found on a snap of a K-bar knife sheath found under a comforter next to Mogan's body, according to a recent filing.
Yep, and that's the most recent one. You're right. That is the most recent location.
All right, so let's back this up. First off, they don't actually have Brian Kohberger's DNA, as far as I know.
Well, I mean, they haven't stated that. You're right. They have not stated that publicly.
Well, they haven't stated that it's actually his, because if that was the case, they wouldn't be calling it genetic genealogy.
Exactly.
So the genetic genealogy means that this DNA sample that they took from Kohberger's parents' trash can could have been his dad's, could have been his mom's, could have been somebody else living in the house that's related to him.
Could have been a first cousin.
Could have been anybody in their gene pool.
Yo, you know what weirds me out with this shit is like this, and honestly, it's the same exact thing, and I'm not getting into that with the Gilgo Beach stuff. Right. It's the same thing with the DNA, and it's like, you know, this is, I mean, I guess, listen, if they did it, yeah, they should be getting caught, I guess, for it, whatever. But, like, you just think, like, it doesn't necessarily mean it's that person, though, with this type of DNA that they're using. You know, like, there's that whole side of the mothers.
No,
that whole line that could be anybody who's, you know, there's so many people technically.
Well, if I can add to that comment, that is an excellent point, Nick. If you all recall, and I've compared this, I believe, in our first discussion to the O.J. Simpson case. Mm-hmm. You know, and I don't want to get too big into those comparisons right now, but relative to the DNA, you know, during the O.J. Simpson trial, and you all might be familiar with this name, and folks at the interwebs probably are familiar as well. His name was Dr. Kerry Mullis. He came to O.J. Simpson's defense and volunteered to testify for the defense in the O.J. Simpson murder trial. Dr. Kerry Mullis invented the PCR test, the infamous test that used the COVID test, right? Yep. The PCR test. So he testified that the state of California was improperly using that test to try to convict O.J. Simpson. So, and this would be a similar circumstance. They would have had to use it. They have not stated the state of Idaho, the FBI, or that Othram Labs have none of these parties have stated they use the PCR test. However, they almost had to have used the PCR test because they're claiming they got touch DNA. So they would have to amplify that DNA sample in which to test it, right? And that's the same stuff that kind of happened with COVID as well. You know, the CDC changed their parameters and the regulations as far as the PCR test. They essentially, not to get too into the scientific aspects of it, they take it, a small sample of the whatever they're testing, and then they amplify it by spinning it in the machine. Well, they spin it in the machine too much. Well, let's call it 40 rotations. I believe that was the old normal, and then the COVID, they got a new normal of like 50 some rotations. Well, according to Dr. Mullis, if you start spinning anything in that machine at that rate, you can make anything look like it's in. Yeah. You can make someone look like they have any disease. You can make the DNA stuff do a lot of, you know, funky stuff, which again is what he testified in the OJ case was what the state was doing to OJ.
All right, let me add something to that, JJ.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Okay. So this just backs up. Just get back onto COVID for 2 seconds. Right. This backs up the theory that everybody had, including myself, that the PCR test was nothing more than DNA collection. So, Dr. Kerry Mullis said 1 million times this was not designed to detect any type of disease.
Yep.
But now he didn't say this, but I'm going to say this.
Okay. Dr. Ron's got some progress.
Well, it's just common sense.
I like it.
If you take that long swab for the PCR test and you run it up somebody's nostril, you're going to get DNA no matter how you slice it.
Yeah, there's somebody in the chat who's in the medical field, and they just said the same thing. PCR only amplifies your DNA, and they said JJ is 100% correct.
Yeah, and what they did to say that you were positive for COVID, which could in turn be used for DNA evidence, they ramped up the cycles for testing way past the parameters that would make it isolated to any one particular person.
100%.
Just my opinion, not a doctor. And this is why they use the PCR test for the whole COVID deal, and this is why they're trying to tie it all in to say, okay, you know, that type of evidence, oh, it's DNA, it's definitely his DNA, right? Which they do not have. I don't think they actually got DNA from Brian Kohberger. I really don't.
No, I know when they went to go, I think like, I don't think they do, because didn't they try to find it online and they couldn't?
Well, they ran the samples. So as the story goes, they ran the samples from the scene because mind you, they had more than one sample at the scene. So there's the knife sheath, alleged touch DNA from the alleged knife sheath, but the actual investigatory documents and court filings also dictate that they had 3 other male DNA samples from the areas around the bodies in the house. Not saying like there wasn't like one on the front door and then the bodies were upstairs. According to their own documents, the other male DNA samples were from around the crime scenes of the bodies in the home. So it seems like they have 3 other male samples that are still yet to be identified, and you know that right there is a big problem when it comes to DNA as well here. But it seems that they don't have Brian Kohberger's DNA, because I feel like the state of Idaho would have been happily asserted into some sort of court filing, we've tested Kohberger's DNA and it matched this and this and this, and they have not done that. So I think there's, as you point out, there's a lot of holes here in this DNA stuff.
Real quick, just in the chat, because it was pretty close, but I think you were a little bit over. Lisa says 20 cycle threshold or less is a more positive indicator of a match. Once you exceed 30 cycle threshold, you are now running into error readings or false positives.
There you go. Thank you, Lisa. Yep.
Yeah. It's awesome to have somebody in the chat that knows this stuff. You know, I still have to say we have a serious chain of custody issue with some of this evidence. Number one,
big time.
They say that they have snap DNA from the snap button that's on the K-bar, which is on the little flap that goes around the handle and snaps onto the lower part of the sheath to hold the K-bar into the sheath, right?
Yep.
So it would seem to me, if anything they would get would be at least a partial fingerprint off of that.
There you go.
They're not talking about fingerprints.
Nope.
They're talking, well, maybe in a sense, if they're calling it snap DNA, maybe that could be what they're talking about. I'm not sure about that.
No, I think you're right. I don't think I've seen anything about fingerprints. And again, that would be an important thing. And any defense attorney worth their weight, they would be able to quickly poke holes to any jury in the presentation of that evidence, because, well, how did my client, the defense attorney would say, how did their client get their DNA on the snap, but they didn't have fingerprints on this sheath? And then also on top of that, even if it were his DNA on there, and again, touch DNA just means, he could have shook someone else's hand. That person then touched this sheath on the snap, and that would have transferred his DNA on it. That is very plausible. And again, presenting that in a courtroom and having a defense attorney poke that hole in there it should be, weak enough for the state to even present this evidence. That's why I think the state is continuing to hide this evidence, because they know how weak it is.
It is a capital case, right?
It's a capital case.
So here's the other thing. Do you really think, because we haven't seen any evidence of this sheath existing, number one.
Zero.
Yeah. So, I mean, we haven't seen any pictures of it, and I can
true.
understand that. However, whenever big cases are filed or whatever, they always blow it up in the media. They lay all the evidence out on a table. Oh, I got a stack of $100 bills. I got a silenced 45 automatic over here. I got an AK-47 over here. Look at all this evidence we got. Now, you would think if they were going to do that, they would lay out a table showing this knife sheath.
Yeah.
Right? We don't even know if this knife sheath exists, nor at this point, I don't think the defense actually knows if this sheath exists either. But it's going to have to come out in discovery. Whatever the prosecution has for evidence, they have to give all of it to the defense. And this is what they were messing with initially. And this is why Ann Taylor's coming back with, well, you'll get the alibi when we're good and ready to give it to you.
That's
exactly.
right. Didn't the judge actually have to force like a deadline for them to actually hand over everything in the discovery? Because I think that might have changed since the last time we did this.
This cannot be open-ended. They need to get this shit rolling.
No, you're right, Nick. The judge did set a deadline for. Hold on a second, my dog's jamming up. Go.
It's all right.
He's fine. Yeah, no, the judge established a deadline for Kohberger to produce the alibi. That was last Monday. He did not do that. They've established numerous deadlines for this discovery, and it keeps going back and forth. I think now. So now what's going on? No, go ahead.
They didn't see it either at first, right? Wasn't it like something that popped up after the fact as well? Because it's not in the pictures, right?
Well, yeah. So if you look at the statements of the initial responding officers and the lead investigators in the case, everyone seems to have a different conflicting story of where this knife sheath was. As Ron pointed out, the most recent story is it was underneath a comforter. Now, that's the first time a comforter has been brought into the storyline. Previously, it was in between the bodies of Madison Mogan and Kaylee Gonzalez. At one point in time, it was underneath each one of these bodies. Now it was underneath Madison Mogan's body and underneath the comforter. So again, they continue to change these precise locations. But again, I would say the key factor to focus in on there is in the actual arresting affidavits and court filings, mainly the arresting affidavits in this case, there is zero. It's very ambiguous. It should say we discovered this knife sheath at this time, at this location, and by this person, again, naming the person, and then it was then seized and put into evidence under this tag number, right? And again, that does not exist. Those statements do not exist in any of the filings.
Not only that, JJ, but there needs to be crime scene photos of that location of the knife sheath before it's touched or moved.
Yep, and all this is integral in the custody of the evidence. So custody of the evidence can become a major factor in any, and especially in a capital case like this, because if you didn't cross your T's and dot your lowercase J's, that could be an issue with trying to convict an individual, such as a murderer in this case.
I'm sorry, Nick, but did you guys see kind of nailing down the timeline a little bit better? Have you guys seen that?
No, I haven't actually.
Okay, so what they're saying now that Xana Canoodle was on her TikTok at 4:12 in the morning.
Oh, that sounds correct.
Yeah.
Okay. She got her food delivery at 4 a.m. So if they know they got the food delivery at 4 a.m., why don't we see who brought the food, how they brought the food, what they were driving for a car? That's still very important. So now they're saying she was on her TikTok account at 4:12. So if she's on TikTok at 4:12, she's awake. She's not asleep.
True.
So if they're saying that this happened between 4 and 4:25, 4:12 to 4:25.
I mean, that's like almost smack in the middle. I mean, come on.
You know what I'm saying? Unless she completely passed out and this guy knifed her, or whoever knifed her in her sleep. So what I don't understand is that there's really no sign of struggles, right? Like not really any signs of struggles that we know.
That we know of.
Yeah. And then the surviving member, and I thought that this was very interesting.
Two surviving roommates.
Okay, so one of them come out and said, I heard somebody walking around in the apartment.
Yep.
And then I heard somebody crying, and then somebody saying, don't worry, I'm going to help you.
Yep.
Okay, who's talking to who and what time is it?
Well, these are some good points. If I can provide some greater detail here for you and provide a better sight picture of what you're talking about, Ron. So the initial time frame was 3 to 4, right? And that was so these details you just mentioned with the DoorDash delivery, the TikTok account. These were not the law enforcement authorities did not include these in their initial timeline. So these were details that were brought out later, not by law enforcement, and then produced into their timeline so that they can make them fit, right? So they were taking the square block and putting it into the circle hole, if you will. And on top of that, so this alleged communications that occur between an assailant or assailants and the one roommate that's mentioned in the arrest affidavit. So there was 2 surviving roommates, right? Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk. Now, Dylan Mortensen is the one mentioned in the arrest affidavit for Brian Kohberger. However, the defense is focused on Bethany Funk. And what's interesting also is building this timeline is the authorities have used the 2 surviving roommates' cell phones. They say that in the arresting affidavits that they've used the surviving roommates' cell phones to build this timeline. Well, wait a second. Why would you not be using the victims' phones to build this timeline, especially the victims ordering DoorDash, especially the victims on a TikTok? But they're not in the actual filings. in this case, they're not using the victim's cell phones. They're using the surviving roommate's cell phone, and only one roommate, it seems, and that's Dylan Mortensen. When the defense has subpoenaed Bethany Funk as far as to support their case, and have basically alluded to the alibi of Brian Kohberger rests upon the testimony of Bethany Funk.
Well, what's interesting about this is it went from 3 to 4.
Yep.
Okay, gives them an extra hour to do whatever. But if she got a DoorDash delivery at 4 and she's on her TikTok at 4:12, and then they're allegedly all dead at 4:25 or 4:30.
Yep.
All right, that's not a lot of time to murder 4 people.
No,
Oh,
not to murder people, clean up the scene, and leave the scene.
All right, so my point is this timeline that they're trying to nail down to a tighter timeline is, I don't know what their reasoning is for this, because nothing happened between 3 and 4, not by the sounds of it.
No, doesn't seem that way.
So everything happened within a 12 or 13 minute period.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, it just doesn't sound.
It
right.
almost seems like everybody kind of came back, like, I don't know, and then like just shit happened, and that, I don't know, very weird.
Well, allegedly everybody was back no later than 1:56 a.m. But initially the police tried to say that was 1:45 a.m. and that was the return of Madison Mogan and Kaylee Gonzalez. Now, it was once again, a third party is correcting the law enforcement's timeline in this case, because it was Kaylee Gonzalez's sister who accessed her sister's phone and discovered the food truck video, the infamous food truck video, and also accessed the ring doorbell camera on the front door, saw them exiting the rideshare service that they used to get home, and arrived at 1:56 and corrected law enforcement there. So once again, law enforcement has been getting corrected along the way from their initial 3 to 4 a.m. timeline, which was the initial public statements they made. And it seems to me, the way I perceive these things, is they've painted themselves in a corner.
Real quick, I just want to acknowledge the chat. There are people saying stuff in here. Yeah, real quick. This is what Angel's saying. I'm just taking their word on it. They said that Xana spoke to her dad about around 12 a.m. and said her and Ethan were at home watching movies and eating pizza. Why order more food a few hours later? I mean,
right.
I do get that. That's a good question. Xana, and the reason why I'm kind of entertaining this, and I do think it could be something, is that even when I was doing stuff with the Gilgo Beach, I saw Xana coming up. There's a few connections actually of names and things between both cases when I do gematria, and the name does mean, according to Lazarus, and I did check too, Xana can be like a fairy or a like water nymph, and it's big in Spanish and I think Austrian and a few other places. And there was something else, but I forgot what they said. The whole thing with the touch DNA. I know Fire, sorry, I forgot the whole name. Fire Pixie had mentioned before, and I'm not saying that this is a possibility, this isn't what happened here, but it is a possibility actually. This whole touch DNA, I mean, you got a pizza box with the Gilgo Beach guy where it's just something sitting in a trash can that other people could have brushed up against something that brushed up against that, or like even with Kohberger, it's like with this touch DNA and them finding these things kind of out in the public. It's not like they're getting when they went through the garbage and shit, and they get stuff. I don't know. I just feel like it's not like they're getting this touch DNA shit that's in areas that could easily be getting it, I think, from other people. And I just find that very shady.
Even if it were valid evidence, it's not strong evidence, right?
Yeah, no, it's just like I do think it does open it up to more discrepancies, the way they're getting it and finding it.
But I'm glad that Chad brought up the point about Xana and Ethan, the other two victims here in this case, because you're right. They're right. That was brought out by Xana's father, and now because initially, once again, law enforcement authorities had claimed that Xana and Ethan were the Sigma Chi fraternity house, which was Ethan's fraternity. Now it's within eyesight of the home because it's right along Greek Row there off of campus. But once again, that busted the law enforcement's timeline, right? If they're trying to say that Xana and Ethan were at this party from 9 p.m. to 1 a.m., well, then that was not true when Xana's father came out and said, well, no, I spoke with her. They were at the house. They were at their own home at 12:30. So once again, this law enforcement timeline from day one has just been moving the target along. Every time some new objective point of fact from a third party comes up, law enforcement's like, well, we gotta adapt our timeline now and put that in there and switch things up. So if it were legitimate, what I'm getting at is we're a legitimate timeline. If it was a legitimate investigation, it was an objective timeline, you wouldn't have to do that.
Yeah, the same person, Angel, that mentioned something earlier. They've said a few other things. Actually, asked me to scroll back up and check it out. I would say this is actually a very interesting theory, or possible actually, and it's actually kind of genius to do it like this. If you wanted to be shady, I guess. I mean, who's to say that when they went and checked his place, they didn't use that sheath and just rub it across something like a pillow or a blanket that he's on? How do you know you didn't already take that and just rub it against something that
they didn't even have to check his place?
Yeah. That's why I said we got a serious chain of custody issue with this knife sheath. And here's something else I'd like to just add real quick.
There's no body cam footage either, they said, too. That's interesting.
Would it be possible
hasn't been released, hasn't been produced.
Would it be possible that Xana actually wasn't the one on her TikTok?
Certainly possible.
Yeah. Well, if that was the case, it would be DNA evidence on her phone, because phones only work if you touch them with a bare. You can't have gloves and work a phone. You can't, not even rubber gloves don't. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. Just a question. I see
what you're saying. Yeah, I see what you're saying. They do make gloves that you can use a touchscreen, but they're unique. They're special. Yeah. Generally speaking, you do have to have bare hands on. Yeah. And in regards to the touch DNA, though, one other point is they didn't have to go search his apartment necessarily. Brian Kohberger was involved in the doctoral program for criminal justice and applied for a public safety internship at the police department over there in Washington State University, Pullman, Washington there. So they may, again, I think I've made this comment in our previous episodes. There's no clear indication that he did not get that position. There is a clear indication that he did apply for that position. So he may have already been an intern over there working with law enforcement, and the two departments work hand in hand. In fact, the old chief from Pullman is now the chief for Washington State University. So, and they're all part of a joint operation over there, joint 911 center, joint SWAT team. So these departments very much function as one already. So they may have just said, hey, go look at the intern's locker and let's get some DNA, touch DNA. It could be as simple as that. That's what I'm saying.
If this is any type of law enforcement cover up, if it is, say, organized drug ring related, like you don't pull any of that off unless you're paying some cops off.
Well, that's a good point.
So if that is the case, then I don't think it would be out of the realm of possibility that they would actually do what you just said.
Absolutely, Ron. I think it's very reasonable to assume that there's something like that could be at play here, especially as we've talked before about the large volume of drug trafficking that has been going on these two campuses within the Greek communities, the fraternities, the sororities. In fact, if Nick wants to put that in the link, or the link I sent him in the show notes, I mentioned it last time. Now, the local drug regional task force is comprised of the law enforcement departments of the Pullman, Moscow, the 5 neighboring counties. All of the prosecuting attorneys and the police chiefs sit on the board of that task force. So the people prosecuting Kohberger literally have a bird's eye view all day long, every day, of the drug operations in that town. And in fact, one of the examples that we discussed last time in 2019, I believe it was a press release I sent. I think I sent to you as well, Ron. Pullman, it was the drug regional task force, but the report was out of Pullman, Washington. And they quoted one of the fraternities over there as running the largest pill stamping operation in the state of Washington. This was back in 2019. Now, they don't tell you in the press release, which fraternity it was. And I have looked. I'm not saying that I could have missed it. It's possible, but I have looked. And it seems that case has been sealed, because I cannot find evidence in the court record of that case.
Yes, I do remember us talking about that. Yeah, very much so.
We do have evidence, very publicly known evidence, of large-scale drug trafficking operations that the same precise officers, prosecuting attorneys, etc., are involved in that task force and running that task force are the same ones that are convicting and prosecuting or attempting to convict and prosecuting Kohberger.
You know, it's interesting. You mentioned
so there seems to be if there is a drug trafficking operation, if the police are involved, there is definitely a conflict of interest there, in my opinion.
You mentioned what are these Greek fraternities you said before? You said something about Greek, right?
Yeah, the Greek communities, the fraternities, the sororities.
Yeah, I just happen to still have that, I guess, meaning of Xana up, and as you were saying that, I just happened to look at the screen. And it says in ancient Greek mythology, Xana represents the concept of wilderness and is often depicted as a nymph or spirit of nature. So I mean,
that's interesting because I don't know how deep the theology or philosophies of these students that involve themselves in the Greek life go, but you never know, really, I guess, right? Because I can see her sister's also a sorority member over at Washington State University, so her siblings are also involved in the Greek life.
I'll tell you what, JJ, I really think the theory that these Greek fraternities and sororities are all part of a nationwide drug trafficking organization, I don't think you're too far off. I think that's definitely possible.
Yeah, I think I think there's a lot to be said there and it's not just unique to this campus. I've kind of followed these cases around other campuses and other reports over the years. Because, one thing that's always bothered me is, we have this war on drugs in America ever since the Reagan years or even the Nixon years, really. And, nothing, if anything, drug trafficking has only increased over this time, right? So it's created a black market. It's more lucrative market, and it's grown exponentially over this time. And if you look to see where a lot of these large scale kind of incidents are, whether it be the use of drugs, large scale use, or large scale trafficking, either instance, it's a lot of it's on college campuses, and it makes sense. You get your customers in at a younger age, you get them hooked. They got these kids, especially within the Greek life. These kids have money, right? As far as the trafficking within the Greek community, the Greek life, and college campuses, right? You already have a built-in nationwide system. You have a system of secrecy already built into the system because if you're not part of the organization, you can't go to the functions, right? Especially if you're a guy, you can't go to the functions. If you're a girl, I think they have some slightly relaxed rules in that regard. However, if you're, for the large part, though, these are secret societies.
That's a really good point to put it. I mean,
yeah,
so you
for
have
sure.
You already have this veil of secrecy. That would be again, if I was operating like a drug cartel, that would be where I want to go deal drugs, just from a business standpoint. You're a businessman, Ron. You understand these concepts, right?
Yeah, endless
totally
supply
makes sense
of
to me.
customers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Endless supply of customers.
There's always new ones coming in.
Yeah, and the secrecy that's involved, and just like anything, you talk about the war on drugs, Nancy Reagan, Just Say No campaign.
Yep.
Right, the whole DARE campaign, where the cops would go to the schools to talk to the little kids, to talk about the evils of drugs.
I grew up in that DARE environment in school. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, what better cover though?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We know that across this nation, it's a lot of crooked cops, and we know that they're taking the drug money. We also know that there's people on the federal level that are taking the drug money. This amount of drug trafficking does not happen without somebody higher up knowing.
Right.
It's plain and simple, because the big cartels will actually alert the police to who's dealing.
Yeah, to take out the competition.
Okay, get rid of our competition. Believe it or not, the movie Scarface, the one with Al Pacino, was so incredibly accurate when it came down to him dealing with that police detective from Miami who was actually working for the drug dealers. And he told Al Pacino's character, listen, we like snacks. Just give us enough so we can get a bus once in a while to make it look like we're doing our job, basically.
Yeah.
I think it's very accurate. I think that's what we got going on here. And the only way they can take the eyes off of themselves is to somehow manipulate the evidence, pin it on this Kohberger guy. Now, listen, I'm not saying this Kohberger guy is just a regular normal person, because I don't think he's normal at all. However, do I really think that he went in there in a short period of time, slashed 4 people to death, left no blood anywhere, no footprints, no fingerprints. Nobody walked in any blood. Dude, there would be blood literally everywhere.
Oh, for sure.
And it's hard for me to believe that a person like Kohberger would be able to do this. This is more of something that a natural born psychopath would do.
I agree.
This is what cartel hitmen do. They do not care.
Well, that's what I was going to say. This to me, all the hallmarks of a very surgical, incursion into this home, the assassination of these kids in a professional manner, like I said, like a cartel hitman, right? But also, again, the police have already produced evidence that would substantiate any claim that this scene was already cleaned up, right? So the police initially, when they were searching, when Kohberger was first arrested, they got a search warrant for his apartment. They were looking for, if you all recall, a Vance shoe print, a Vance shoe. They allegedly found a Vance shoe print inside the home. However, that was not a bloody shoe print. That was a latent shoe print, meaning the law enforcement authorities had to put down a chemical onto the floor, put down some powder on top of that, and then produce this shoe print. So right there, in their own evidence, in their own statements, it's showing that this scene was cleaned up, right? If they're not finding a bloody footprint, they're finding a latent shoe print, right? And that's what they're looking for at Kohberger's apartment. They're already tacitly admitting, obviously not expressly admitting, that the scene was cleaned up. They have not said that again. They have not expressly said that, but their own statement and evidence says that.
Okay, so
right?
check this out. Check this out, JJ.
Mm-hmm.
If this was a party house, how many people are coming and going? Number one. Number two, you got four, you got 4 or 5 people, 6 people in this house at the time.
Mm-hmm.
How many footprints do you think they would have been able to find other than one, which leads me to believe that there was a cleanup and somebody got sloppy and left a footprint? Because that house should have been wall-to-wall footprints. And then how could they distinguish whose footprints they were? Are they going to go through every person that lives there, go through their closets and take pictures of every pair of shoes that they have to actually single them out away from the actual footprint that they found? So they're saying they found one latent footprint.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is not
even
possible.
2. Yeah, just one.
You would think they found a shit ton of footprints and they had to go through them to figure out which one,
That's my point. It had to be cleaned up. It had to be cleaned up in the meantime for them to find one footprint.
And you know what?
And also, I scrolled through all the social media accounts of these girls early on. They all wore Vans. The occupants of that home wore Vans shoes.
Mm-hmm. Oh shit!
So who's to say it's not one of the surviving roommates, one of the murdered roommates? Well, who knows? There was never any honest or objective investigation to that regard. They just said we found this one latent shoe print. It has to be the culprit of this crime, and we're going to go look at Kohberger's apartment for this shoe. They didn't find it.
That was my point, JJ. They would have to look at every pair of shoes that every person that lived in that house owned.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like even the shoes that they possibly were wearing, like if they were all in bed, then they're not wearing shoes, right? But their shoes are going to be by the door or they're going to be by their bed. They're going to be somewhere. Mm-hmm. Now, if you want to eliminate that footprint as any type of evidence, well, you need to see what the people are wearing. And that
would be the objective way to do it, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a professional investigator.
You could fool me, Ron. You do a lot better than these cops do.
These are simple things that you would do without even thinking twice about.
Yeah.
This is text. I do know a little bit about investigations, just for disclosure, because I used to have to know about them, and I also used to know how to avoid investigation. So,
a fixer, huh?
That just makes me good at being analytical about situations like this. That should have been done. That should have been done.
Spot on with your analysis for sure. Well, and it just it draws more scrutiny into the actual investigation that, or lack thereof, that has taken place here, right?
Yeah, there's so many holes in this case. I think they made a big mistake by saying they were going to try him capital. Obviously, murdering 4 people, that's a capital offense. But I'm saying maybe they should have been a little bit more careful about what the initial charges were going to be before they came forward with a capital murder case, because now evidence has to be a whole lot better than it would be for, manslaughter, or et cetera, whatever. Not that I think any of this could be deemed manslaughter, It's just there's so many holes in this case.
Good point.
I really don't know how the prosecution thinks they're going to move forward in this unless they have a stacked jury. And it's going to be...
It's funny you say that, because they've already stacked the grand jury, according to Kohberger's counsel in the recent filings this week. That's the assertion by Kohberger's counsel, is they motioned to dismiss the grand jury indictments, quoting Idaho law, and then quoting a sealed affidavit that was filed with the motion that we can't see publicly. But according to the public statements in the motion, they're basically, Kohberger's defense counsel saying the state rigged this grand jury and it needs to be thrown out. The indictment needs to be thrown out and revert back to the public arraignment hearing that was already scheduled at the time of the grand jury indictment.
Okay, so
it's a good point you make about rigging the juries.
So just for the listeners, all grand juries are stacked. That's
to a certain degree.
Yeah, well, that's why it's so easy to get an indictment.
Well, yeah, there's the famous, I believe it's out of Nick's state of New York, the New York State former chief of the Supreme Court, or chief of their appeals court there, and they have a somewhat funky court system in New York, but I think it's they don't call it the Supreme Court there. I think it's their chief of the appeals court, is the lower court under the Supreme Court there. But the judge there, I think it was the 80s, famously said, Saul Wachtler, I believe was his name, famously said, you can... essentially, a prosecutor has such great mobility in a grand jury process that they can indict a ham sandwich.
Yeah, you know what?
And it's what you say, because they have, first of all, you can only they can present one side of this jury, and they don't have to present an opposing side. And there's generally speaking, there is a lower level of lower bar for for incriminating evidence, right? However, in the state of Idaho, they do seem to have some pretty stringent rules regarding grand juries, according to what I've been looking at based upon Kohberger's counsel's motion, right?
Well, that would be interesting.
Not only do they have to do a random kind of selection process, which is, it seems that they didn't do this kind of, not to get into all the details of how that random selection process works. However, generally speaking, folks show up for jury duty, and then out of the pool of different jurors, they randomly select this grand jury for a grand jury situation, right? And it seems, according to Kohberger's counsel, they did not do that. And secondly, the state of Idaho seems to require a higher bar of criminality or incriminating evidence to indict somebody. They actually say in their own law, which was quoted by Kohberger in their motion to dismiss this grand jury indictment, that you have to have beyond a reasonable doubt. So generally speaking, that's only beyond a reasonable doubt's left for trial. You're right. Most jurisdictions, grand juries do not operate on beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah, funny enough fact about the ham sandwich. You're absolutely correct on that. When I was indicted by a federal grand jury,
nice. I like to hear this.
Based on evidence from the Organized Crime Task Force based out of Providence, Rhode Island, my lawyer said exactly that to me. He goes,
nice.
He calls me, he goes, well, you're indicted. I said, yeah, I'm not surprised. He goes, listen. He
casually just says that. You're indicted.
My whole case, we'll talk about it off the air sometime. Right. This was a very casual thing, right? Believe it or not, because they knew they weren't going to get anything out of me or really anybody. He said, but don't worry about that. They can indict a ham sandwich. He literally said that to me, verbatim, what you're saying. So yes, that's a very common phrase that they use. I was not aware that the state of Idaho had different parameters for that. Which is
they
interesting.
seem to have a higher bar there for sure. Yeah, it is interesting, because it is usually, like you said, like you point out, it's the actual the proof, the level of evidence and the proof of a criminality that has occurred is generally a lower bar than beyond a reasonable doubt within a grand jury process.
Yeah, I know in the state of New Hampshire, everybody gets indicted. Doesn't matter what the evidence is. At least that's how it seems that it works. But
which there's some pros and cons that process, but it is nice to see that well, in theory, that justice should be met when you have a higher standard of law. But however, clearly that's not what's going on here in this case with Kohberger, because if it was beyond a reasonable doubt, I mean, none of the actual evidence is presented to the grand jury is public yet, so it's unknown what that was. However, just on the evidence we've discussed here today already and in our previous episodes, I mean, does any of this evidence meet the bar of reasonable doubt, just in either of your gents' opinions?
As far as a grand jury point of view, really.
But again, reasonable doubt. That's the bar. That's right. That's what you have to meet.
Kind of on the fence here. I would say, based on the evidence that was presented, be it skewed or not, if I was an unbiased person sitting on a grand jury, I would say yes. There was enough to at least indict him. Listen, without indictments, nobody makes any money. The legal system's there to make money. If you are not indicted, and you walk away, the lawyers aren't making any money, the state's not making any money, and if you go to prison, the prison industrial complex isn't making any money. This is why it's so easy to get indicted, because they'll say, you know what? Let's just indict him. There's enough evidence here to say, reasonable doubt or lack of reasonable doubt, or however you want to put that. Let's let it go through the legal system and see how it turns out on the other end.
Yeah, and I forget the exact verbiage. It may not be beyond a reasonable doubt in the exact verbiage, but that's what they're getting at in the Idaho law, right? What they're getting at is it's a higher level of standard in which you have to present evidence. Now, again, the prosecutor could have cherry-picked which evidence to present to the grand jury.
Yes.
They may have presented two pieces of evidence for, you know what I mean? So
they can do that. I'm sorry, JJ.
They absolutely can do that. No.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you. However, they can do that. They can cherry pick. They can cherry pick not necessarily what they consider their best evidence, but enough evidence. It only takes a little bit of evidence to get indicted. They might say, okay, I'm going to give you X, Y, Z, but I'm going to hold this ace up my sleeve for later, because this is what I'm going to throw them off guard with. And this is the exculpatory evidence that we were talking about before, that the prosecution is withholding from the defense. The prosecution does not have to give the grand jury every piece of evidence they have to get an indictment.
Nope. Not at all. Nope. That's totally legal to do it that way. What are your thoughts on that, Nick?
My opinion, there's a few things.
Grand jury process.
I thought that was real shady, that whole thing. But I mean,
I think it was real shady how it went down. But as far as the evidence that would have likely been produced to a grand jury, do you think with Kohberger's counsel's recent statements that this was a rigged process, and they didn't follow the Idaho law and the grand jury indictment process, which I think an argument can definitely be made for that. Whether or not it's true, it certainly seems like it's true at this point in time.
Well, I mean, just for me, if I was on that jury, I know, honestly, for some reason, that 8-hour gap is what really throws me off with this whole thing. And I really just think of even hearing that, I'd be like, there might be something weird here. So I would automatically be like, I already think there'd be something. If it's him, there's more to it than that. So it's still I'd still have a doubt. You know what I'm saying? It just wouldn't seem right to me. Like a juror could come back and say, listen, maybe there's enough to indict him. We would like you to come back with a little bit more. And this comes back to, what is the prosecution hiding?
Yep.
You say,
they're hiding lots of stuff because it's obvious because they keep denying discovery.
Like what NY just said, that whole time gap may not have even been presented to a grand jury. They may not have even known about that. It would be really interesting. Can we get our hands on the evidence that they actually used for the grand jury? Is that public information?
So they have motioned for that. Kohberger's defense has motioned for that. It, much like everything else in this case, it just continues to be sealed or denied, right? If it's not sealed, then it's denied. So nothing's really public about that yet. But I think this most recent filing, I think, was actually July 25th. So a couple days ago. They just posted. So they've been doing all sorts of funky stuff, too, on the Idaho court website, right? So things are getting removed on there and put back up on there. And it just, even just the dissemination of this information is being, for lack of a, for more of a technical term, fucked with. So there's a lot of that stuff going on.
What about the theory? Because I've seen the videos and I didn't see anything that is even close to this, but there's some people throwing a theory around that there was some type of altercation at the food truck, which caused somebody to go cuckoo to go and kill all these people.
Real quick,
Have
before
you guys heard anything about that?
Before I forget about that scene, I remember I think I mentioned it to JJ. I don't know if I said it in the chat. I was watching that not too long after we had did our last show. And just like real quick, and like these are just weird things that I see. It makes me question. Because like, again, like to me, magic is just kind of like making you also believe what you're seeing with your eyes. And when I was watching that shit with that truck stuff, there was a point there was one point in the video where there was two people that had numbers on their clothes. Throughout the whole time, there was only a total of two who did end up coming together, saying a few things, and then the other one walked away. And one was 9 and one was 3. And that would be 93. And I was like, that's just really weird. I caught that from like watching that video a few times.
Interesting.
I just wanted to throw that in there.
This could be some of the more metaphysical aspects surrounding some of the occult nature of the incident altogether. Who knows, right? I think that's an interesting point. I didn't personally pick that up, so it's nice to hear that
this
some of those additional aspects.
These murders could definitely be part of some type of occultist ritual killing setup. So. Yeah, I mean, because even Kohberger's lawyer, basically comes out in this quote. There is no explanation for the total lack of DNA evidence from the victims in Kohberger's apartment, office, home, or vehicle.
Yep.
And Ron, you even saying occult, in my opinion, that would still also give credence to the cartel. Because in my opinion, they are into that shit themselves anyway. Yes. I don't think a lot of people know that, but like they are heavily into that type of shit, especially when they're doing sick stuff.
A lot of good point. A lot of cults operate no different than gangs do. They sell drugs, they sell guns, and they sell sex, prostitution. So it's the same. These terms are interchangeable in many regards, be it gang, be it cartel, be it cult, right? Yeah. So I think that's a good point to bring up. And relative to the food truck video, Ron, I've seen some of the the interwebs, theories and suspicions about some of the characters in the food truck video. No, I don't put much credence to that stuff. No, to the point. I think it's a good point you brought up. Oh the things I find most compelling. Oh, no, good.
That was my point, JJ. I saw nothing in any of them videos, and I watched several.
I agree.
That would indicate that there was any argument, any altercation, or anything between anybody there.
And I apologize. I misunderstood you. But that's a good point to bring up still, nonetheless.
Well, that's what I was asking, if you had heard anything different, because I didn't see anything that showed any type of altercation. Yet this is being thrown around. Now, is this being put out by someone as disinformation to kind of muddle the waters a little bit? We do know that that's a possibility when, say, the prosecution or the police or the investigators really have nothing to go on. Then they're going to start throwing information out there to get people's mindset in a different direction or in a form of a distraction, right?
A magician's distraction, right, Nick?
Yeah. Okay, so something else.
Now, we're on the same page. I'm tracking with you, Ron. But if I can just interject real quick, what I find most compelling about that food truck video is the coat Madison Mogan's wearing. I know we briefly discussed this in previous discussions here on the series. That coat was later found in the precise location where that same silver sedan, the police were operating an undercover unit just in about 200, 300 meters in front of the home, the murder home. That coat, by all appearances, was found at that same location where that vehicle was sitting. So again, if she's wearing the coat home, arriving home at 1:56, the police are sitting in an unmarked sedan, silver unmarked sedan there, and that's near a fire hydrant, roughly 200 to 300 meters in front of the home. At 3 a.m., which is, again, is documented by their own police body camera footages, how did that coat get there? And is that indeed the coat Madison Mogan was wearing? Again, it's a male's coat, very oversized for her. She's a smaller woman. and it seems to have the same unique white identifying tag on the left arm, which again appears to be the same precise coat the police are photographed picking up. Not clear if they took it into evidence, but seen picking up near that fire hydrant, again, from the precise location where that silver unmarked sedan of the 2 Moscow PD officers were sitting, again, in and around the time of the murders.
Okay, personally,
so that's what I find most compelling.
Personally, I think the coat is a nothing burger.
It's possible.
I think it's just being thrown in there. If you look at the video of the food truck stuff, like they're wearing like hoodie type sweatshirt type deals, right? Possibly a coat, but do we know from the videos, does this coat that was found 300 meters away from the scene happened to be right next to where a surveillance car was parked? Does any of the surveillance from the food truck show any of these people wearing this coat?
Madison Mogan.
So
Yeah,
she
was wearing
was
that coat
okay. So
in
she
that food truck
was
video.
okay. So she was wearing the coat that's described as the one that they found down the street
That's
from the
what
house.
That's where the ambiguity comes into play. So no one wants to go into any further details within the investigatory documents about even bringing this code into evidence. However, within news media reporting, the police are photographed picking up this coat off the ground, looking at this coat like, oh, this might be something, right? And again, it has a white tag right along this kind of the bottom area of the arm around this region, and it seems to be the same white tag and the same black coat that Madison Mogan is pictured wearing in that food truck video, and it's obviously a male coat. It's not a female coat. It's a men's coat. It's far oversized for a small woman like Madison Mogan.
Okay, so I'm gonna dig a little deeper into that. I say that I think it's a nothing burger only because we haven't heard a lot about this coat until recently, right? But
I don't think we've heard anything about this coat. That's one of the big question marks I drew on the whole case.
So there could be something to it. So for part 4, we're going to look into this coat. This could be an angle. However, a gentleman that has a coat, it was a cold night, right? Would say, if you're trying to, maybe buddy up with a chick, say, oh, you're awful cold. Right. You're awful cold. Here, take my coat. Like,
right.
Step on my coat in the puddle type of deal.
No, I'm tracking. I get you.
Yeah. So this coat, maybe I should backtrack on my statement. We'll look into the coat thing.
I'll share with you the photographs that I've saved in regard to the coat. My biggest question with the coat is if it was the coat Madison Mogan was wearing, how did it get to that fire hydrant where the unmarked police car was sitting, and at 3 a.m. So they're there. I don't know it's not clear precisely what time they arrived. They're there at least at, I believe, 2:30, roughly 2:30, right? She got home at 1:56. So is there a spot in time where she could have walked out her front door after being dropped off in her driveway, ran the 200 to 300 meters in front of her home, thrown the coat over on the ground, and went back inside? It's certainly possible. Doesn't sound reasonable, but it's certainly possible.
Well, if you remember when we first talked about this coat, I don't know if it was in part 1 or part 2. I had a theory that this ride service, we don't know if they were being rude to the driver. Just say, for instance, to kind of go back to what I believe I said last time, say she didn't have the coat on in the car, or as you say, maybe it wasn't her coat at all. It was a coat that she either borrowed from somebody or maybe took from the club. Who knows?
Yeah, right? She just grabbed it on the way out of the bar and said, I'm cold.
Just grabbed it on the way out of the bar. And maybe threw it out the window before the rideshare place got to their residence, or she left it in the car. The rideshare people drop them off, gets down the street a little ways, sees a coat that doesn't belong to any of them. He's maybe not happy with them and probably said, F you, here's your coat, and threw it out the window. That's what I would have done.
Yeah, that's exactly what you said last time, and I agree with you still. Yeah, that's a very plausible scenario. What I would like to see, though, is some sort of investigation into, is that the coat she was last seen wearing, the last public place she was seen alive, and how did that coat get there? Those are really the only. I'm fine with it being that scenario, and I think that's a very plausible scenario you've painted.
I wish we could talk.
I just want to see an investigation into it.
There's 2 people I wish we could talk to. One, the DoorDash driver.
That would yield a lot of answers, I believe.
Would like to talk to the DoorDash driver, ask him a few questions, ask him what kind of car he drives. They should have already done this. And if they did do this, well, they're withholding that information. Of course, we don't know what they
Oh,
have
I think they
because
do
it's-
state that they have identified and know, but they just don't tell you anything about
You're
it.
correct, Nick. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
They have claimed that they've identified the DoorDash driver, but they just
Nothing.
haven't released any details. They just say they ruled out the DoorDash driver. They ruled out everybody immediately, right? This is within days. This is this is within days of the actual crime. They're saying, "Oh, we've ruled them out. We've ruled them out."
Okay.
How did you rule them out?
Okay, but if they questioned this DoorDash driver in any way during the investigation, that has to be put in file, put into evidence, and that needs to be released to the defense on discovery. Now,
Absolutely.
all right, so I would like to see pictures of that coat, JJ. If you think of it, message them to me, next day or two. Okay.
Yeah, not a problem.
Now,
not a problem.
something else that I brought up in an earlier episode, and I find still interesting. Remember when I said that there was a glove found outside the house the next, we don't know if it's the next day, the day of, or the next day, but it was not picked up on right off and was not placed into evidence until like a day later?
I think it was actually 2 weeks later.
Okay, so nobody knew anything about this glove, right?
Right.
Now I'm reading in another report, lab analysts discovered DNA from another unknown man on a glove found outside the residence on November 20th, 2022. Okay.
So it sounds like it was 8 days later.
Okay, so nobody saw this glove the first day they were there?
Right.
What kind of glove is it? Was there any evidence on the glove? Was there any blood on the glove? Whose DNA is it? It says unknown man. So they have no idea. So if they have no idea, this guy's print, this guy's prints, this guy's DNA is not in any database that's available. Now,
Could be a cop.
Maybe
Could be
somebody said maybe they get their
I've long
drugs.
thought that was one of the law enforcement authorities' gloves. They just threw. It was found on the perimeter of the scene. I think they threw it out. That was kind of my take on it. Or was Nick?
Somebody said maybe they get their drugs via DoorDash.
It wouldn't be the first circumstance that has occurred.
not out of the realm of possibility whatsoever.
No.
Okay, so if one of the investigators took off a glove and just tossed it, that's freaking sloppy. I'm sorry, you don't do that.
Well,
because
par for the course.
Yeah, but you don't want that stuff out in the public either. Anything that you're touching on any crime scene,
But
you don't want that. That
the
needs
law
to go.
enforcement's not who found that glove, though. It was some random private detective who came to town. He's the one who found that glove.
You know, this was another thing. They said it again in the chat. I saw them mention it up at the top, and I forgot to ask your guys' opinions on this. And I'm just wondering, like, if you also know like the scenario better, but. Did they say like how many people and like was there like vehicles? Because this person is like saying there was like 6 parked cars and supposedly like 12 people in the house.
Yeah, I don't think they've ever really come. So law enforcement has said other parties showed up to the house before they were there. They acknowledged that other parties were present when the 911 call was made. They have not divulged the quantity or names of these parties. And there was 1, 2, 3, 4, I believe 5 cars in the driveway.
So like,
if I'm not mistaken,
one person who doesn't know any of these people is just gonna show up and try to pull that off with all those. Like, would you even think about trying that?
Exactly.
I'd be like,
Exactly.
I guess
With
I'll come
all
back
those
another
vehicles out there,
day.
You would assume there's that many people there.
All right, this goes
That's
back.
a great point. That's a great point.
Yeah, exactly. And this goes back to the other idea that we had. It took a long time between the time that these people were murdered, if their timeline is even close to being accurate, and it was reported. But we do know from some things that we've seen that people in the sororities and the fraternities knew about it.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe they went to the house before the cops got there.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the parties that
well, hold on,
went
JJ.
there.
Were they the ones that did the cleanup? I mean, we don't know that. But
I mean, yeah, think about that.
Question.
But that's a really good point, Ron, because like I think the girls or people I've even said that's involved with that fraternity, like it's almost to the point to where it's like, well, you contact us before you even call the cops.
Yes.
Yep. No, that's the rules they're supposed to operate by. But no, I think in my mind that is exactly what occurred here. That right, wrong, or indifferent, let's say that some of the kids that came over there, the young adults, the college students, let's say they weren't involved in the crime, but they wanted to clean up things so some of their friends didn't get in trouble. That's very plausible. That definitely could have occurred here.
They called up Harvey Keitel from Pulp Fiction.
The wolf.
The wolf, you're right, yeah.
Please call me Winston. Yeah. You know what? That very well could be the protocol right there, right? But we do know
they are instructed to do that. The Greek community, they are instructed: do not call the police in an emergency. Do not call family members of any alleged dead or injured party. Call your fraternity president. Call your sorority president. They'll call the upper echelon of that organization, the national chapters. We'll take care of it from there.
Yeah, I think it's going to get more interesting from this point on, and that's why we need to stay on top of this.
Oh yeah, once it actually starts going to court, I think it's going to be a shit show.
The closer we get to the trial dates, or even, I don't even know if they've done any pretrial hearings on this yet. Right, because there's going to be a whole series of pretrial hearings just to lay the law down and come up with a game plan that's feasible for both sides. All I see is both sides arguing back and forth.
That's all that's going on. Yeah.
And
a lot of stuff getting sealed. A lot of stuff that's not being looked into. The additional male DNA. The police subpoenaed bank records of unidentified parties that have yet to be really known who owns these bank accounts, or cell phone accounts that unidentified parties of who owns these cell phone accounts. It isn't Kohberger. It isn't the victims. It isn't the surviving roommates. We know that much. So there are a lot of additional details that do need to get hammered out before any trial can occur. And as of right now, the trial is scheduled for October 2nd, I believe. And that's a good point. So that's a good point that you bring up. So this is obviously going to continue to get delayed because these things have not been figured out yet. Now, as far as the hearing goes, the public arraignment hearing was supposed to occur then that's when the state swooped in and said, well, we just did this confidential, sealed grand jury indictment. So the public arraignment hearing is suddenly canceled, right? And I find that very intriguing because that occurred in at the same time frame as the defense getting a subpoena for Madison Mogen's deposition. The defense was going to travel so the two surviving roommates, they left town. They're not back at school. I'm not diminishing these individuals whatsoever. I wouldn't want to be back there either. I'm just saying the defense was going to go all the way to Nevada to go depose I said Madison Mogen, I meant Bethany Funk, to depose Bethany Funk. So the moment that happened, right, the state was looking at a public arraignment hearing, I believe 2 weeks after that subpoena got issued by the court, and that's when the state said, oh, secret grand jury time, or surprise, we got the sealed grand jury indictment, so no more public information on what we did to indict Kohberger here, because that, as you know, Ron, that would have come out in the public arraignment hearing.
Yeah, and this could be the reason why, even though the indictment was delayed, it could be another reason why they wanted to get the indictment taken care of, because once the indictment is down, everything can become like sealed, secret. And only that information could go from the prosecutor to the defense, and they're not gonna go out in the public and tell anybody what they have. Well,
they're already not divulging it to the defense, right?
Right. But after
discovery demands,
right. But after defense has their total discovery, and I think why the prosecution is holding off is because they don't really have enough discovery, enough evidence to give in discovery, so they're freaking stalling for as long as they can to build their case bigger. And that's why they're stalling this whole process. And that's a violation of Kohberger's rights, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Okay,
rights to due process, sure.
So there's going to be a lot more things, obviously, and I do apologize. I hadn't had a lot of time to dig deep since last episode, but between now and we do part 4, I'm going to actually put some time aside and get kind of a little bit deeper into this, because I think from this point forward, this is when it's going to start getting really interesting. And what's going to be interesting is what Kohberger comes out for an alibi, because to me, they're leaving that as a cliffhanger. They put a little taste out there, say, well, Kohberger's got an alibi. But the prosecution's like, okay, well, tell us what it is. No, I'm not going to tell you anything. Why don't you tell us what you have?
Well, that's right. That's right. But the defense has alluded in kind of, you can take a logical leap in guessing that their statements of, well, Kohberger's alibi is contingent upon the cross-examination of state's witnesses, right? Well, who's the state's witness that they had just subpoenaed right before the grand jury indictment? Bethany Funk.
Mm-hmm.
So you can kind of read between the ambiguity of these filings and see that likely the alibi is contingent of Kohberger's is contingent upon the testimony of Bethany Funk.
Okay, so they are still going to depose her?
Well, I mean, they had an order. They had an order to depose her. She was subpoenaed, so supposedly, yes. However, given the way this case is going, it's hard to tell.
I have heard that I think that they're supposedly, I've heard. I don't know if I think rumors or whatever. That like them trying to interview her is like almost is like going to possibly clear him, right?
Well, yeah, that's the most recent filing this past week was Kohberger's defense saying, look, that we didn't produce an alibi. However, Kohberger's alibi is contingent upon our cross-examination of your witness's state, right?
Yeah.
And again, if you want to read between the lines there, that witness would likely be Bethany Funk because that's who they already subpoenaed for a deposition for exculpatory evidence for Brian Kohberger, right?
Mm-hmm.
So again, they're not really clear in these things, but if you want to read between
the
activities,
connect the dots, it would make sense.
Matter,
yeah.
So it seems that is his alibi, is the testimony of Bethany Funk, which that's going to be a new element that this whole case as well. That's going to be interesting. Did they know each other? Did they have some sort of relationship, be it platonic, or some sort of romantic relationship, what have you,
or hidden relationship?
Some sort of side piece action. Who knows?
Or OnlyFans relationship.
Right.
That's what I meant by side piece. But thank you for clarifying.
I always say I think that's a high possibility, Ron.
I brought that up before. Number one,
there was evidence.
I hate to say
that there was OnlyFans activity. So
yeah. Okay, so just saying, if this Bethany Funk could be everything hinging on her deposition. Like, I hope she's like being careful. I hope she doesn't, go out to the Mojave or go out into Death Valley. If she's you said she's in Nevada.
I believe the Reno area. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I hope somebody's keeping tabs on her. Like I said, going to be real interesting going forward. I do promise I'm going to dig into it a little bit more for part 4, and let's see what goes on. I think it's going to get as NY likes to say, more high strangeness coming.
Yeah, I definitely think so for sure with this and the other case.
Well, I think there's some good points you make, Ron. I look forward to hearing some more of your feedback in the future here on the subject. If I may bring up two more points before we close out the conversation here today. One being where I discussed earlier or in the previous part 2 regarding the greater implications, some of the political issues that may be weighing heavily on this case, being if there is a drug trafficking operation going on involved in this case, where is that money getting laundered? And then there's the money laundering bank 30 miles north of both universities at Moonstone Bank, another very occult sounding name. And again, I think there has some implications to why they, FTX, the cryptocurrency company.
I've seen that a lot pop up actually when I've been running numbers, seeing Moonstone. I've been seeing that pop up a lot.
That's interesting.
And not making a connection at all. Wow.
Well, okay, that's interesting that you found that because FTX, if you recall, FTX, the confirmed money launderers, right? They the cryptocurrency exchange. They bought out a rural bank that was as old as the towns up there, 125 years old.
Yeah.
Right. One building, one bank. It's not a chain of banks. They bought this bank out 3 years ago, and were clearly money laundering through that bank. And I say clearly money laundering based upon the FDIC records, based upon the Department of Justice seizing $60 million from this bank in January. Mind you, the 10 years prior to FTX purchasing this bank, they only had $10 million in deposits total. So for them to have $60 million in just a portion of deposits from like a quarter of last year to get seized in January, there's obviously some money laundering stuff going on with a confirmed money laundering owner, the FTX, right? So the thing I ask there is, what's going on with this FTX situation? Because there's an inverse relationship right now going on between FTX CEO Sam Bankman-Fried and the number of charges he's facing, right? So as the more and more publicly is known about the crimes of FTX and the money laundering operations and other crimes, as more of this has become public, the crimes or these charged with it are all going this way. So the known crimes are going this way, and the charges are going this way. There's an inverse relationship. So the Department of Justice right now is dropping more and more charges for some reason.
I was just going to say he had more charges drop just this week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I find that very strange. Strange.
Well, a lot of that is based on his donations to the Democratic Party. They want to drop them charges because if they drop those charges, they don't have to tell anybody what they know. Okay, that's
obvious. That's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah. So we already know that whole FTX thing is shady. This Moonstone Bank has all the visuals of what we used to call a mob bank. You know, a bank. Yep. It could be a cartel bank. I'm just saying. Used to be back in the day, just from the knowledge I had from my past life, that these folks would have their own banks. And not only that, they had their own insurance agencies. And this is where, and believe it or not, this is where they made the bulk of their profits were from fraudulent insurance deals run through their own insurance agencies, money deposited into their own, well, I won't say own bank, but let's just say we use the term a controlled banking institution.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which if you get enough rich guys together, you can start your own bank. I know a guy that started a bank when I was a kid.
Do you know how much money was involved with that thing? Somebody in the chat is saying that it was $93 million.
With FTX?
With Moonstone Bank?
Yeah.
FTX is way bigger than $93 million. That's bigger than Jeffrey Epstein's Ponzi scheme.
It's in the billions. Yeah, it's in the billions.
Yeah,
FTX is.
Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme and Charles Ponzi, the guy who invented the Ponzi scheme, combined. And FTX is the biggest Ponzi scheme in American history.
Where they're getting the 93 million NY is that's what they can account for that Sam Bankman-Fried donated to the Democratic Party.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that may be true. Yeah.
And that's also 93.
No, that may be true. Yeah, because the money at Moonstone Bank exceeded 93 million as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's all based on what they can prove that he donated to the Democrat. Not just Democrats, some Republicans too. Yeah, for sure. But this Sam Bankman-Fried FTX thing.
The same uniparty, right?
This FTX thing is going to be a nothing burger when it's all said and done.
Well, hopefully, I mean, given historical examples, I think you're correct. Given BCCI, the bank of, the CIA's bank in money laundering that was connected to the Vatican and the Archbishop here in America, Paul Marcinkus. That whole mess. You got the savings and loan scandals of the early 90s, which again is kind of tied into that same scandal from the 80s. So I think historically speaking, you're correct, Ron. I'd like to think that maybe some things have changed. Again, who knows? But I do often again wonder how much of that is connected to this Idaho 4 case, because FTX files bankruptcy in Delaware, which most corporations are headquartered in Delaware for corporate legal purposes.
Sure.
They file bankruptcy there, and again, 36 or 42 hours later, these murders occur in Moscow, Idaho, in and around a small rural bank that FTX had purchased that suddenly became public upon the filing of the bankruptcy. And if you're trying to clean up this operation, you got to tie up loose ends. And as part of those loose ends, the distribution center of some of these drugs out of this university, I think it's possible.
Yeah, and I think it's important to, I know we were thinking we were going to talk about it tonight, but we didn't get there. Part 4, I would like to talk a little bit more in depth of the drug connections that one mother and one stepmother had involved, which could be part of this as well.
Yeah, that could be part of it as well. But I'd like to throw one more point at you in response to that. The University of Idaho fraternity president who died of a drug overdose death back in March of this year, who had been supplied the drugs by folks within the social circle of the victims in this case, right? That individual overdosed in Seattle. That was where he didn't die in Seattle. They traveled. They got him out of the hospital there. He died about an hour and a half east of Seattle. However, that same case I mentioned earlier out of the Washington State University fraternity that was doing this next largest pill stamping operation in Washington State history, they were distributing the drugs to Seattle. So there is clearly a pipeline of drug activity between these two small towns, these universities, Washington State University, University of Idaho, and the city of Seattle. Where the extension of that drug trafficking channel goes, it's undetermined at this time. However, I think using those two examples of the Xanax pill stamping operation and this University of Idaho fraternity president's drug overdose in Seattle, I think there's a lot more. It draws in a lot more scrutiny to the matter and a lot more questions that need to be asked.
Yeah, and I know this is a theory that I haven't really shared, might have with you guys a little bit. I still say that there's a Mormon cartel angle here.
Oh yeah, I would not doubt it, man.
You've
I
gone
would
to the
not
right
doubt
place
it.
to talk Mormon conspiracies.
Because we know Salt Lake
Me
City,
and you.
Utah. Salt Lake City, Utah is the hub. Okay, so the drugs could be coming up through Mexico with Mormons. Oh, we're Mormons. We wouldn't be smuggling anything.
Don't sleep on Idaho, Ron. Don't sleep on it. You got that's Mormon fundamentalist country, and you have some very, very powerful Mormon fundamentalist groups up there.
Exactly, and this is why I think there's a Mormon connection, at least to the supply portion of this whole deal.
Yeah.
So
no,
the
as
drugs
we discussed last time.
Yeah. So the
previous
drugs
episode. Yeah, the Mormons are definitely involved in cartel operations in Mexico with the next team called the LeBaron and the Romney families down there in Mexico. Those fundamentalist groups and the ones that the women and children that were killed we discussed last time. So that's a good point. Good point.
So coming from Mexico to Salt Lake, from Salt Lake up into Idaho, which is heavy duty Mormon country as well.
Big
and
time.
then spread out all over as far as what you said, Seattle. Because when you're in Seattle, what are you going to think? Well, the drugs are coming from offshore. Okay, so they're looking
at Canada, up in Vancouver.
They're looking in the wrong direction because the drugs are coming from Salt Lake.
It's very possible. I agree with you. Yeah, I like it.
Just an angle for everybody to look into, the listeners and the people in the YouTube chat, which I signed on to and I've been watching. So
nice. Oh,
nice.
Awesome.
So,
You should be able to. You should be able to, both of you should be able to comment as well with your own YouTube channel if you have them in the chat too. Yeah, I think that's like a new thing they added on StreamYard. So if you have your own channel, you will like kind of sign in and you can answer with your own shit.
Yeah, so I got in on the on your chat.
Nice.
I've been watching them, but so much going on here, and then NY wants to get involved with this Go Beach thing, and I'm like, oh my god,
both, yeah.
We're
right? So,
we're investigating on multiple fronts, but that's an interesting case right there as well.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Ron. That's a very interesting case. And I think there's a lot of, much like the politics associated with the Idaho case, I think there's politics weigh heavily on the Go Beach case.
Hell yes.
And
I think so.
He said, and he and I have kind of discussed this stuff offline, and I don't want to get into it right now in this discussion, but certainly would be happy to discuss in the future with both of you gentlemen. And if I can make one more point here on relative to the Idaho case, and something I heard Nick bring up before regarding the movie Scream and some of the elements that he's seen around the Scream motif of the Idaho case. And did you want to share any of those thoughts, Nick, before I made my point?
No, because believe it or not, I'd have to go back and check what I had for that. I totally forgot.
Well, I don't remember exactly. I remember you saying stuff about you saw some elements of Scream kind of incidents, comparisons between Scream
there was a lot of,
in this case.
You know what the problem is? I do think there's a possibility of the Kohberger stuff possibly being involved with this in some weird way. And there was a lot of Scream symbolism within Kohberger stuff. So it started making that's why, like, to even get into that, it's this would be I'd be here for
we can say that
a minute.
for part 4, but no, I couldn't recall the exact details of what I recalled you saying, but that is what it was relative to Brent Kopacka. That's right.
Yes.
But so on October 12th, might have been October 13th, 2022.
Right.
So 1 month prior to the murders, the University of Idaho Film Society, the Student Film Society there in the university, did an official screening of the first Scream, Scream 1. Just throwing that out there
That
as,
is
an
bugged
oddity
out.
of high weirdness.
High strangeness for sure. Yeah, that's right. I remember you told me that.
It's just a coincidence.
Yes.
Setting the stage, possibly, you know.
Yeah,
what I mean?
no, I'm gonna have to definitely go back and start checking some more stuff out before we do this. I was so stuck with the Go-Go Beach, I really kind of slacked on this.
Yeah,
myself.
no worries. I couldn't remember off the top of my head what those connections were, but yeah, you're right. It was relative to Kopeka.
Yeah. Do you guys want to plug your channels again, real quick? Ron, we'll go with you. Even though his links are on the bottom anyway. But
yeah, come and check me out, Ron from New England, on Instagram. Also on Twitter, Ron from NE. Check me out on either place. Also, host of the Wicked Planet podcast. We do one show a week. Come check it out. It's available everywhere. Awesome. Thanks for having me on again, guys.
Of course.
I really love these conversations.
Oh, hell yes, man.
Yeah, for sure.
These
So I want to thank you guys for having me on. Help me join in.
Thank you, Ron. I enjoy your insight.
Hell yeah.
Especially with your some of your stories with the garbage fella and the some of your inner workings.
He's got some real life experience.
The indictment process.
I definitely do, because I'm probably twice as old as either of you guys.
Yeah.
So
Flavor.
Thank you. And JJ, plug yourself real quick.
Well, Nick, I appreciate the invite again, and Ron, it's great talking with you. Nick, great talking with you here on this conversation. I think again we have plenty more as we've identified areas to explore here. Looking forward to doing that in the future here. Any folks of the interwebs who want to come check out Operation GCD podcast, we're located anywhere where I'm located. I'm the host, anywhere podcasts are located. I have link trees on my Twitter and on my Instagram, which Twitter is at Operation GCD, and Instagram is at Operation_GCD.
Awesome. And I think I have all that down there in the bottom as well.
Something I would like to add real quick. Sorry. Any listeners, if you have any insight or any questions or any feedback on any of this, feel free to email any of us on this panel, and we will look into it. It will, send it in, and we'll check it out, and we'll talk about it in the following episodes. Because
that would be badass.
You know, this is going to be an ongoing series. I have a feeling until this whole thing is settled, and that could be literally a year from now. So
easily.
You're totally right.
Easily.
So stay tuned, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody who was in the chat and adding, and, the questions in the comments. That's why I go live. I love it. I appreciate all of it. And like Ron said, reach out to us if you want to help, send us some directions or topics to talk about with this stuff. And that is the end of another NY Patriot episode. Until the next one, everybody be well. Later.